Welcome to Expressions of Leadership, a podcast showcasing the many faces of leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry. From teachers to artists to C-suite leaders, we explore how people own their authentic leadership, celebrate their triumphs, overcome challenges, and share lessons learned. In today's episode, we're joined by guest Dr. Kate Hernandez. Kate is the owner and founder of Therapy in Motion, a mobile physical therapy practice dedicated to providing one-on-one, functional-based care in the comfort of patients' homes. With a passion for helping individuals regain strength, mobility, and independence, she and her team specialize in exercise-based interventions for aging adults, treating diagnoses that range from orthopedic to neurological disorders. Their mission is to empower the elderly population, combat ageism, and treat patients in such a way that they know they can count on us. Therapy in Motion inspires confidence and longevity through proactive care, equipping individuals with the tools they need to stay active and healthy for life. Beyond her clinical work, Kate is the co-founder of a nonprofit organization, Knowledge is Cancer's Kryptonite, or K.I.C. for short. K.I.C.'s mission is to empower, educate, and provide funding for those with a personal or family history of cancer to seek genetic counseling and testing. Welcome, Kate. It's so great to have you on the Expressions of Leadership podcast.
I am so excited to be here. So I'm really looking forward to this.
So what inspired you to establish Therapy in Motion, and how does that aspect of mobility of your practice enhance patient care?
So I think what I did, I worked as a PT for about 20 years in various settings before I started this practice. And so what I did was I sort of took a hybrid of all the things I love about being a PT and melded them all together to form a practice that I could be proud of. So I value working with patients one-on-one. I value working with patients in their homes. And that's a really easy marriage. You know, you go to people's homes to treat them, and you're visiting with them one-on-one. So I just feel like patients, especially older adults, get a lot more out of that. And it's also, I'm really passionate about it because we treat a lot of older patients that fall, and 80% of falls occur inside the patient's home. When I worked in an outpatient setting, it was very difficult to try and figure out why these patients were falling at home all the time. But we had to try and be a detective and piece it together. When we go to their homes, though, we're right at the scene of the crime, so we can figure out real quick why they're falling, you know, in a certain area of the house, or and then just being with them and getting to see the interactions with caregivers and the whole psychosocial aspect that plays a huge role in helping people improve.
And I imagine that convenience factor and that feeling that, hey, I'm comfortable in my own home helps them to improve even faster.
Yes. A lot of people in general, but especially older adults, are intimidated by those gym settings. And especially since COVID, many older adults are still very afraid and hesitant to go into a gym type of space for any type of physical therapy. So I think this is less intimidating on many different fronts. And I think that is very attractive to our patients.
And your mission emphasizes empowering the elderly and combating ageism. Can you share some specific strategies or programs that your practice employs to achieve this?
Yes, so there's it's not a certification, but it's a continuing education course that I found when I started working with the geriatric population. And it really is all about teaching clinicians like myself how to not underdose these patients with exercise. I think as therapists and people in general, we often treat older adults with we're just a lot more gentle. We're afraid to push them. And that actually does the same amount of damage as if we are giving them too many exercises or too aggressive of exercises. So there's a happy medium there in the middle. And when I took this course, I realized that they can do so much more than what I've ever given them credit for or asked them to do. So they can lift heavy weight, they can deadlift, they could do certain power lifts, and all of these things are very functional to how they live their lives. So they need to be able to pick something heavy up off the ground. They live alone, an Amazon shipment comes. What are they going to do? Well, we better teach them how to lift heavy off of the ground. So that's one example of how, and my employees we all fall into that same type of treatment, in that we don't want to underdose these people. We certainly don't want to make them do too much either. But we need to push them, just like any age person
Hmm.
needs to be pushed.
Hmm. And if they aren't being pushed or stretched, then they really aren't going to know what their limit is
Yeah,
either.
exactly. And then that, when they don't know their limits, that feeds into the ageism.
Mm.
I can't tell you how many times I've said, well, my daughter says I shouldn't go get the mail. And I say, why? And, well, she's afraid I'll fall. Well, then let's practice it, because you should be able to go get them. Of course, you should go get the mail. Your neighbor doesn't need to bring the mail in for you. So it's all about sort of pushing them to their edge. Now, there are things, it goes the other way too. Like, hey, Mr. Jones, get off the ladder. That's not necessary. So it does go both ways, but again, trying to find that middle ground. I'm on my social media, we do a lot of videos of exercises that we do with patients. And I think that helps feed the culture that I'm trying to create of, hey, look what we're doing with these older people. They could do so much more than we ever thought they could.
And I think that's also helpful for other caretakers or family members to understand as well that, like you said,
Yes.
they might actually be limiting them when they don't need to.
Yes. And I have many times sent a video of their loved one doing an activity. I've sent them to the caregiver and said, I just want you to see what your mom and I did today. So that, then we don't need to treat grandma or mom like she is too old and too frail to do anything. They could do more.
Absolutely. And how have your personal experiences influenced the services and the type of approach you take in therapy and motion?
I just think that so before this, I worked in an outpatient setting. It was a great clinic, a great practice, and it was also very busy. What I learned, I take something away from every experience. And so what I learned from that experience is certain types of patients are safe and fine to see several of them at the same time. But when it comes to these older adults, you really, really want to spend this one-on-one quality time with them to really get to the bottom of things. The next setting, when I left the outpatient setting, I went to a home health setting. And that was where I really learned about the value of being in people's homes. So I think that just learning from the different settings about what I liked and what I didn't like is what brought me to this.
Now, I want to turn our attention to the nonprofit Knowledge is Cancer's Kryptonite, also known as K.I.C., that you started with your sister Colleen. What was it that motivated you both to establish the organization?
When I was 42, they picked up a tiny little spot on my yearly mammogram. They wanted to biopsy it. They said it was the size of a grain of sand. I thought that was ridiculous that they wanted to biopsy it, but I'm glad that I did it anyway, because
Mhm.
it did turn out to be breast cancer. So I was only 42. I had an aunt, my dad's sister, my Aunt Carol, who passed away from ovarian cancer at the age of 54. Um, and all throughout my life, I would ask my doctors, is this something I need to be afraid of? Is this something we should be proactive about? I've lost an aunt to ovarian cancer, premenopausal, very young. And I was consistently told that it did not matter because it was my dad's side, that it was my dad's sister. So lo and behold, I get diagnosed with breast cancer at 42. And unfortunately, the first doctor that I saw did not think it was important to do genetic testing. But because I advocated for myself and found a different doctor, the very first thing that he did was actually do genetic testing on me. And I'm really, really grateful because it shaped the entire journey for me, because I did come back positive for the BRCA1 genetic mutation. So that is what guided my treatment as far as what surgeries to have and how to follow up. And it really was all behind this BRCA1 genetic mutation. So fast forward then, my sister knew she had to also be tested. So she got tested. She tested positive for it also. And she scheduled a preventative hysterectomy, which occurred the week before the pandemic shut down every elective surgery. So she managed to get hers in. She went back for her follow up and assumed it was just going to be a normal follow up. But what she found out that day was that they actually incidentally found stage 1 ovarian cancer in this preventative hysterectomy. So without that knowledge that she had the same genetic mutation, this never would have been found at stage 1. Unfortunately, ovarian cancer is usually symptomless until it's much later into the disease process. So my sister, I always say, I probably would have been fine because breast cancer has come so far. My sister, however, this really did save her life. And after she got through chemo and then she ended up having a mastectomy, um, after she got through everything, her and I said, we've got to do something. Not enough doctors understand the importance of this. Not enough people understand the importance of it. So hence K.I.C.K was founded. Our maiden name is Kickle, and everyone called us K.I.C.K growing up. So we took K.I.C.K and found an acronym that would work with K.I.C.K, as sort of a nod to our maiden name. And yeah, and so from there, we have partnered with some genetic counselors and a massive, one of the biggest labs in the country for running these genetic tests. And we pay for people to have genetic testing. We never want money or finances to be the obstacle that stops them from getting this important testing.
Fantastic. And then how do you ultimately facilitate the access to the tests using these partners?
So, we had a genetic counselor on our advisory board when we first started K.I.C.K, and she put out a message to the genetic counselor listserv across the country and about what we do. And from there, people just heard about us. And so that's the big way that we tend to genetic counselors will reach out to us and say, I have this patient needs testing for these reasons and can't afford the testing because of these reasons. Can you agree to pay for the testing? We've kept our finger on the pulse of that process because we want it to be individualized. We never want to, Colleen and I both feel strongly that we want to hear the stories and we want to know why these people need testing first. Um, we also, through that listserv, this other nonprofit found us, and their nonprofit, it's called J-Screen. J-Screen is devoted the same mission, really. Um, but they don't have somebody like us to help pay for their patients that come to them for testing. So that is where the bulk of our tests have come from. I think we're up to about 700 tests around the country now, and in almost every state, but it mostly comes from these genetic counselors and from J-Screen.
Thank you for sharing. So incredibly important for people to do this kind of screening so they know what
Yes.
potentially am I going to be facing in the future.
Yes. I mean, it's scary. People often avoid it because they feel like they're opening Pandora's box. And sometimes you are. But with a family history of these things, as we all know, earlier detection is the best way to go about treating these things. So, the earlier we can catch this, if we could catch it before people even have a diagnosis, then they can have the right surveillance and again, catch things early.
It's really incredible to hear how healthcare is evolving and how, in both therapy and motion, as well as with Kick, you're able to work with all this modernization and what's happening in order to deliver something of true quality and something that's going to change the lives of the people that you touch.
I think the two of each therapy, emotion, and kick both serve a similar purpose in a very similar industry.
Well, this has been fascinating so far. So let's take a quick break and we'll continue right after this. By partnering with Expressions of Leadership, you'll reach an audience of professionals passionate about leadership and growth. For sponsorship opportunities, please contact us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com. We're back on the Expressions of Leadership podcast with our guest, Dr. Kate Hernandez. So let's talk leadership now. And as you think about people in your life, who's influenced your leadership style the most?
So when I came into this business ownership position, I really came in raw. I knew what I liked out of leaders that I have worked for in the past, and I knew what I didn't like, and that was all I knew. But I also knew that in order to grow my business, I needed to develop a community and I needed to develop relationships. And at the time, I was really thinking more along the terms of I need to develop relationships so that I can increase my business or so that I can get more patients. But what ended up happening was by forming these relationships, I ended up finding so many other small business owners that are also women that I have learned so much from along the way. And there's actually a group. We named ourselves the Small Business Warriors. We meet once a month and we just troubleshoot on things going on and, some of the hard things that have happened in owning a business and some of the wins. And I've learned so much from these other women about their leadership styles, what they think has worked, what they think hasn't worked. And that collaboration has really, I feel, helped me develop into a better leader.
Mhm. And as a better leader, what are some of the personal principles and values that guide the way you lead your team and drive both organizations forward?
My big, big value is communication. Communication on every level. So that includes communication with the team, in between or amongst the team. So, I always say we do not leave an email not returned, a phone call not returned, a message not returned. In order to build confidence and set us apart from other businesses or organizations, especially in healthcare, we have got to emphasize communication. It is where the left hand, often the fallout in healthcare is a lack of communication in which the left hand didn't talk to the right hand. And I always say we are part of the solution and not part of the problem. So that value of therapy and motion and of Kick has guided and continues to guide the principles that really have shaped this business.
Can you give me an example of that?
So in healthcare, there is a team, and the team involves many different members. The team is the patient's family member or loved ones or caregivers. The team is the therapist, and that is the PT, the OT, the social worker, the doctor, the so many different clinicians involved in the care team. The team is, that includes my admin. That includes the person verifying benefits. There's a lot of cogs to this wheel. And everybody needs to keep in communication in order for that wheel to run smoothly. And so, a specific example would be, especially when you're in somebody's home, and you're dealing with the family who is present. And of course, we have permission to speak to the family when they're there. Um, and they need to understand exactly what their loved one is dealing with so that they know how to best support them for success. And if you're missing that piece, then this patient is not going to thrive. If you're missing the piece where the PT is not talking to the OT about things that happen in a treatment session, then that patient's not going to thrive. And our goal is to get these patients to thrive. So
Mhm.
the communication is a huge aspect of that.
And I imagine too that that also helps you to coordinate, collaborate, and ultimately provide the very best care plan for your
Yes.
patients.
Yeah, and that is, I would say my leadership style is very collaborative. And that I think that comes from working in healthcare. It's always about a team approach. And in fact, my team of people, I don't call them employees, or I literally, we call ourselves Team Tim. We are a team. So I think that being collaborative only benefits each other. I think it prevents burnout and it benefits the families and their loved ones.
And as a leader, you are also someone who sets that big picture vision for the organization. So, how do you balance that while also ensuring day to day operations run smoothly?
I have a saying that I go by, and that is just take the next step. Um, yes, we need vision, and I need to forecast what's going to happen 6 months from now, a year from now. But we have to take the next step. We can't necessarily jump to 6 months from now. So really being mindful about staying in the present. And actually, I'm going to make a really crazy correlation here, because when you are diagnosed with cancer, you really do learn, you have to learn how to stay in the present. Everything out in the future is scary, scary, scary stuff. And it's nothing that's happened yet. So when I went through all of those things, not just with me, but with my sister and my mom and my dad, we all have learned the importance of staying present, staying in the present. Take the next step. Forecast, prepare, but take the very next step. And that's all that you can do. Somebody gave me this advice when we started K.I.C.K. They said, no matter what, stay true to your mission. And that advice I have applied numerous times, not just to K.I.C.K, but also to therapy emotion. There are many business opportunities that arise out of each of these businesses and nonprofit. But many of them are outside of the realm of what the original mission was. And I have been steered down paths with therapy emotion that, oh yeah, that looks like a really good business opportunity. And then I get halfway down the path and I realize, no, that is not in line with my mission. I've got to come back to my mission. So that mission is really grounding for me, and with both therapy motion and with K.I.C.K.
And really staying within those boundaries so you can keep that focus.
Exactly.
Now, the other thing about leadership is that it involves motivating and uplifting others, especially as you want them to be part of this big vision that you're talking about. And you work with both healthcare professionals and community members. So, how do you inspire and enable your team and those that you serve?
I believe in abundance over scarcity. So there's a lot of competition out there, especially in the healthcare industry with my therapy practice. But I remind myself, in fact, I wear a bracelet on my wrist that says abundance. I remind myself that there are plenty of patients to go around. And with that, then comes that relationship building. So I don't view competitors as competition. I actually view them as another relationship I can cultivate that's going to help continue to grow my practice and their practice. So that's saying the boat right or the tide rises all boats. It's true. And especially as female business owners, we have to empower each other. There's no time to cut the other one down to make yourself feel better. I want to make sure that my community knows that I am who I say I am, and we support each other. And I try and lead with that example when, if somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, so and so is also doing what you're doing," I say, "Well, good for them." That's
Hmm.
great. So I think that leading by example and knowing that, again, the tide rises all boats. I think that is where I stand.
Hmm. And I imagine for the people that you're working with, when they see that ultimately you do come from this space of collaboration, this space of abundance, that also makes them feel really good about what you're doing and about what ultimately you're spearheading as someone within these industries.
Yes. And I get most of my therapists, most of them come to me after a period of burnout. And I always say I feel like a therapist refuge or something. Like they know that when they work for me, I'm not going to push them in the same way that maybe they were pushed for larger corporations. And we're collaborative and we build each other up. And I think I do lead by that example. And I hope that I continue to promote that within my team and my organization.
And now, running both a business and also a nonprofit involves balancing compassion, especially in the industries that you're in, with strategy. So, how do you ensure that both heart and efficiency are guiding your work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I can speak to this more on the therapy emotion business aspect. So we are in network with Medicare, and that presents a lot of challenges. Um, I won't even get into those challenges. However, patients are, they've worked their whole lives. They are retired. They choose to have Medicare. Um, Physical therapy is no cost to them if they have Medicare. And I never want to quit serving those people. I never want to say, no, I'm sorry, we don't take Medicare anymore. They were just too much of a headache to work with. I never want to do that because I don't think that the patient is going to receive the quality care from somebody else. So I will never not take Medicare, despite the headaches, despite everything else, despite the cuts, everything. Um, but the challenge that that presents is I can't just rely on Medicare as my revenue stream. So I've had to get creative and think about other ways to drive revenue besides depending on Medicare. And so I've come up with these programs and these self-pay options that takes me out of the Medicare realm and just allows a little bit more creative, forward thinking. If Medicare continues to cut and we keep going down that path, well, we've got this other side of the business now that we can also depend on. So we won't have to take away the therapy that we provide to these Medicare beneficiaries.
So thoughtful and truly carrying a real extension of your mission. Well, let's take a moment to reflect on what's been shared over a quick break, and we'll be back shortly. We'd love for you to be a part of the Expressions of Leadership community. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts and connect with us on Instagram and YouTube at Expressions of Leadership. You're listening to the Expressions of Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry. Let's get back to Dr. Kate Hernandez's incredible insights. Looking back on your journey, what pivotal moments or challenges have had the greatest impact on shaping who you are as a leader today?
Okay. One challenge, especially working in the healthcare industry, was COVID. Of course, lots of people would say that. It really shed a light on the parts of leadership that I wanted to make sure I always carried with me, and the parts of leadership that I would rather have left behind. And I carried those lessons into starting this business. I started this business in December of 2020. So we'd already been in the pandemic and through several months of the pandemic. And it really did help shape me as a leader. I said before that I came in raw, and that was some of the raw understanding of how I wanted to be a leader. Was I know what I liked as an employee, and I know what I didn't like as an employee, and that's what I'm going to use to start this.
And as a leader, you come across all kinds of difficult situations and setbacks. So, what kind of strategies help you to stay resilient in those moments?
So this goes back to a lesson that my husband and I always told our kids when, they didn't start a game, or they got, a B on a test, or um, anything that in that moment really felt serious and hard. We always reminded them to look at the big picture. And the quote we would use was, "You're still going to go to college one day." So I know you're 12 years old and this feels like a really huge deal, but you're still going to go to college. You're still going to get a job. You'll probably get married. Life is going to go on. So remembering the big picture is something that I take into my day to day every single day when it comes to
Mhm.
therapy motion and with Kick. Just remembering the big picture, and that um, it might look really, really scary now, but we move forward, and it will not look as scary when we look at the big picture.
Really taking that step back does help people to understand that there's a lot more to your world than just that particular moment. That
Yes,
particular moment is not going to define you.
right.
But in fact, it's all the moments throughout your day that ultimately make up who you are. And
Yes,
so thinking about it in that way, it really helps you to get out of that stuck mindset of just focusing on the thing that you potentially did quote unquote wrong in that
right,
particular moment so
right.
that you do have the strength to move forward.
Yeah. It's all about the big picture. I've made mistakes in my business that have cost me money. And then at the moment, I mean, it really does feel like the end of the world. Um, and then, a couple hours later, you look at it and you go, all right, well, in the grand scheme of things, Medicare's still going to pay me. I'm still going to be able to pay my therapist. Like, the big picture is just a much nicer way to live.
Yes, and you realize that some of these are lessons that we're learning along the way, and those
Yes, they
lessons are only
all
going to help
are.
us be that much better as a business owner, as a mom, or as a friend, etc.
Right.
Now, you're balancing a thriving practice and a nonprofit, so that's pretty commendable. How do you manage these responsibilities, and what drives your passion in both of these areas?
Well, I would say sticking to my routine, having routine. I am committed, very committed and dedicated to my morning workouts and my morning meditation. I think those are grounding for me and allow me to be a better leader. I Setting boundaries is huge for me in order to be a good leader. Knowing when it's time to turn the computer off and stop taking phone calls. Um, at the moment, might feel selfish, but in the long run, it makes me a better leader. All of those things, like I said, ground me, and help me to lead with a more, open mind, happy heart,
Hmm.
not burned out. So I think all of those things are really important in managing both of these companies.
And how do you tune into that passion to stay inspired?
Well, with Kick, it's easy. I mean, we are so passionate about the fact that this testing saved our lives that being able to tell that story, it comes from so deep in our souls. I mean, it really does. We mean every single word that we're saying, and we are super passionate about it. With therapy emotion, it's the same thing. I mean, I have parents that are not old, because I know they'll listen to this, but they are aging. And I like to look at my patients in a way that I would look at my own parents. And I'm passionate about making sure that people receive care from others like me that are treating these patients as if they were a family member.
Hmm. And now, what are your future plans for both therapy in motion and kick?
So that's a great question. For therapy emotion, I mentioned the different revenue streams. And one of those things, I developed a program for osteoporosis. I myself, because of the breast cancer, went into osteopenia very early. So 45, I was diagnosed with that. And I just didn't have a lot of guidance as far, and I'm a PT and I needed help in knowing the nutrition aspect and even the workout aspect. And there was no North Star for me. I had to carve my own path. And so as I figured out what I needed to do to treat this osteopenia, I realized that, oh my gosh, there are so many women out there like me that go into osteopenia, osteoporosis at an early age or even at a later age and have no idea what to do about it. So I've started this program called Bone Wise, and working really hard to get the word out as far as bone health and what we have to do to support good bone health and improve bone health. Um, that topic is getting more and more popular, which I'm really happy about because that, along with the menopause topic, that seems to be a more frequently talked about topic now than it ever has been. And I am thrilled that we're all discussing this now because there needs to be more education and resources out there for patients.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. The more resources, the better.
Yes.
Well, let's take a quick second to appreciate the people out there making a difference, whether it's through healthcare advocacy or simply showing up in their communities. And so, if this conversation is sparking ideas for you, hold on to that. We'll be right back after this short break with Dr. Kate Hernandez. True transformation starts from within. The Forward Project partners with organizations to create meaningful culture shifts and develop leaders who inspire real change. If your team is ready to move forward with purpose, visit www.theforwardproject.co. Welcome back to the Expressions of Leadership podcast. My guest today is Dr. Kate Hernandez of Therapy in Motion and Knowledge is Cancer's Kryptonite, also known as K.I.C.K. How do you actively mentor others who aspire to make an impact in healthcare or advocacy?
I When I started both of these, I had so many people that were helping to guide me as far as how you start a business, how you start a nonprofit. And now people come to me and want some advice on a new business they've started or new idea they have. And I will be the first to extend any type of help I can offer because it is your classic pay it forward. I just feel like I was so supported in making these moves, and I want to make sure that I'm doing the same for others. So, I have many conversations with people about how you start a business, like literally what paperwork do I need to fill out? Everything from that to what do I do about this difficult situation that I'm in? And I love that people want to reach out to me because I still reach out to my mentors as well. And I think it's important to keep on paying it forward.
One of the great things about mentoring is that then those people are able to pay it forward as well. So you continue that ripple effect, if you will.
Yes. And again, it speaks to that whole abundance mindset of
Mhm.
this person's coming to me, and yes, we're in the same business, but we will not be in competition. We are going to support each other because there's plenty of that type of business that we are both trying to secure. There's plenty of that to go around. So let's just support each other. And again, and that goes back to our my small business warriors group as well. Um, we have very similar business models and we're all doing the same thing, but without helping each other through it and mentoring each other, I don't think that I'd be where I'm at today.
Yeah, it reminds me of that saying, this idea that if you want to go fast, go alone,
Yeah.
but if you want to go farther, go together. And
Yes.
so really having
Yep.
that joint idea of how can we help each other to
Yes.
make this field even better and to care for our patients in a way that they should be cared for.
Yes. And that is an actual quote that I use is better together. Um, we are all better together. And
Mhm,
that speaks to exactly the quote that you just said. That's exactly
mhm,
right. I
mhm.
100% agree.
So now as you think about your legacy, how do you want to be remembered as a leader?
How I want to be remembered is I want people to remember me as somebody who empowered them to grow, somebody who led with passion, and somebody who was collaborative in leadership qualities, or was collaborative in getting the team to accomplish a goal together, and the opposite of a dictator.
As we said, better together, and that also
Yeah,
means bringing in the people that you work with and gaining their perspective, getting their ideas. How might you together collectively come up with an even better pathway or better decision?
right. Exactly.
Now we're going to get to our advice and fun questions section. But before we do that, where can our listeners go to learn more about therapy in motion and kick?
Sure. There is the website for Therapy in Motion is www.therapyinmotionllc.org. The website for Kick is www.kickbraca, that's BRCA.org.
Excellent. And we'll make sure to put those in the show notes as well. And how can they get involved or support your mission?
Well, with Kick, we're a very small nonprofit and we depend on donations in order to be able to serve our mission. So we don't do big fundraisers. There's one race every year in Cleveland, which is where my family's from, that we go to and set up a table. We do giveaways and a lot of education, and that is our only fundraiser really of the year. So we rely on personal donations in order to keep moving with paying for genetic testing.
Now for our advice and fun questions section of the podcast. So let's start with advice. What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs, healthcare professionals, or nonprofit founders looking to create meaningful change?
I am going to pay back the exact advice I was given. Number one, stick to your mission. You will be pulled in a different direction many times. Come back to your mission, let it ground you. That's the first one. And the second one is relationships, relationships, relationships. It is all about building relationships and building community in order to serve your mission.
Mhm. Can't do it alone. We have to build people around us and build a team in order to make it happen.
Yes.
And now for the fun question. If you could bring back any fashion trend, what would it be?
Can we just bring back jeans? Like normal jeans? I mean, the jeans right now, like I find it so difficult to figure out what shoes I'm going to wear with these big baggy jeans. And then there's the jeans with the straight cut. Again, what shoes am I wearing with that, especially in the winter when it's cold? Like I can't wear a boot. Can we just bring back normal jeans? Oh, and also although this has come back for some areas, popped collars. I like that. I like popped collars, but I wish everyone would do it, not just like certain people. But a fashion rule I do break all the time because I think it's okay now is I do wear white jeans way before Memorial Day and after Labor Day. I do it.
Well, come join us on the West Coast. We don't mind that so much. I think that's definitely more of a stickler thing on the East Coast than it is on the West Coast. So you can come out here and wear your white jeans whenever you want.
Oh, I love that.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kate, for being with us and sharing your stories. It's been so inspirational. I really appreciate you joining us on this Expressions of Leadership podcast.
Thank you for having me and letting me talk all things therapy and motion and kick.
And thank you to our audience for tuning in as always and spending your precious time with us today. If you haven't done so already, make sure to click on that follow button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Have a guest you'd like us to interview? Questions, ideas, or just want to say hello? You can reach us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com or connect with us on Instagram or YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks to our amazing team behind the scenes for making this podcast possible, including our sound engineer, Graham Palmer, and my chief encourager and advisor, Jeremiah Higgins. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and we'll see you soon. Take care.